Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So I decided to pretty much leak start. I'm going to leak start with Hexblast mines, and we're going to play something really crazy. So instead of sort of just like going straight into the POB and whatever, I thought, oh, let's do a bit of a playtest. Now, at the end of the video, I'll put part of the live stream up that I playtested to do T16 map white maps, which is really funny. But a bit of, I guess, a baseline of what this is right now. This is like all trash gear. Nothing here is good. Nothing here is optimized. It's on a 4 link with basically nothing really leveled up past like base level once you get to like level 68. I'm at level 68. I haven't taken like most of the points in the tree that I'm supposed to take at this stage, so I've still got tons of quests where I need to cash in and get my points and all that sort of shit. So foundationally, this build is bad right now. Like, this is at its low point. It's only got 2 ascendancy points in here. And anyway, let's load up a T5 map, a T5 plateau map to give you an idea of what it looks like. So there's zero investment in this. This is just dropped items all throughout the campaign. Like, we just basically walk straight into mapping without too much hassle. Like, there is a bit of trying to push any harder because I've got no resistances right now is a bit of a chore, but you know, that's easily fixable once I get resistances. That's if I don't get clapped before I even get to that stage. As you can see, like crazy big AoEs, just sort of nukes everything. So I'm just going to change this to Flame Dash because it's better than this early sort of leveling phase. So once you get a bit of gearing on this, early mapping isn't too bad. Like, well, early mapping is actually pretty easy. And we also use wither totems as well, so we stack like 15 stacks of wither. Alright, cool. So, makes pretty quick work of everything. This is like no gearing whatsoever, just a profane proxy ring. Basically, dog shit everything, 4 link setup, no, nothing. Like, it's just no nothing. So, that's what it looks like sort of getting started. So let's talk about the build. Now, the other thing I'll say here is I'm aware that patch notes aren't out. I think they come out tomorrow. Nobody really knows when they come out right now. Will this build change? It might. So I'll put a disclaimer in the comments, a pinned comment below, disclaiming that, and also in the thingamabob, and also in the POB. Patch notes aren't out. This is pre-patch notes, so it may have no changes. It may get significantly more powerful, especially with Sanctum coming back in, where we can get Sandstorm Visage and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Now, the other question you might have, okay, Delve ability. Will I be playing it in Delve? Abso-freaking-lutely, so we're going to make it work in Delve and tank it up. So this is going to be maybe a little less damage than like the crazy tree that I'll have in the endgame tree. But it'll also still do a lot of damage, but it'll also be really good for Delve as well. So there is that. But anyway, let's talk about the build and talk about its mechanics in a little bit of detail. Okay, so what is Hexblast Mine? So basically, the way that this skill works is it uses hexes or curses, and we curse the enemy, and then it basically picks up that curse and it smacks the enemy using that curse, and that scales up the damage. So this is Hexblast here. And then basically converts all damage to chaos damage. So chaos damage with hits is resisted by lowest resistance instead. Against elemental damage. All damage can ignite, freeze, and shock. So you ignite, freeze, and shock absolutely everything. And then basically 40% more damage with ailments if an enemy is hexed. 100% more damage with hits if an enemy is hexed. The hex is removed after damage. So ideally we want to use skitterbots because the skitterbot just keeps reprocking the hex on top of the enemy. This gets more powerful if we dual hex, which is why we would also have, and I have it equipped in the tree, Whispers of Doom. 2 hexes, that stacks more damage. If you can fit 3, even more damage. That's basically the idea. Now, for anyone who hasn't played mine builds, basically it's as simple as you throw your mine down, and then you'll hit your detonate mine. Now, in this case, one of the limitations with this build, when he stops off, one of the limitations with this build is that you need to be in the proximity of enemies. So if you lay too many mines and you don't have the mana to sustain it, what'll happen is your mines won't explode, which is problematic. The other thing too is if your mana pool is too low, then basically it'll choke the build and you won't be able to basically detonate it after mines. So you'll have a period where you have to wait for the mines to die off to be able to recast mines. This isn't a problem with the way that I've structured this tree. There's no cluster jewels in here. There's no nothing in here. Like, this is all garbage gear. The tree's just as it is, up to level 68. So a lot can be done with this. And when I say a lot, this is like maybe 1% of where the build can go right now. Now, Saboteur, arguably, I feel like this will be a lot more tanky. It'll probably get down to like depth like maybe 300-400 before it starts to really bottom out. I don't know how this is going to go at Crystal King, so I'm going to try and build around defense on this and also have a decent amount of damage. Probably not as much as like crazy amounts of damage, but anyway, we'll see how it goes. Now, the other alternative that you could run with this is you could run the Occultist. And to be honest with you, and I'll just pull this tree in here because I've got a leveling POB. The Occultist probably has some really good stuff with like Profane Bloom, definitely, and Withering Presence, but also Unholy Authority, which would mean that you could hex-proof enemies, and this is where this build may run into issues as well. If you have hex-proof enemies on the map, you're probably gonna not do any real damage, but it'll do like a baseline level of damage based on the skill, but not enough damage. So there are some limitations. If you want to try it with the Occultist, there are trees that you can look at PoE.ninja for, and you can definitely try the Occultist. I think I'm going to go with the Saboteur at this stage because the Saboteur feels good, and some of the things like Born in the Shadows and Pyromaniac just give you crazy amounts of defense, which I really like, and you hinder enemies as you cast as well, and Explosive Experts works really well as well, and you basically just stack power charges, so that's basically how that works. So that's pretty much the underlying mechanics of the build. That's how it works. And so we use Hexblast with Minefield support, so then we have a lot more explosions going on. High impact mine support, pardon me, and void manipulation, and then we'll use hypothermia. And I was thinking about some of the new gems that are in the game. Now, the way that this is played is with like Chaom's Heart and Wrath Tide Pit and stuff like that. I reckon you could play it a little differently and run a 6-link chest and use maybe one of the new like Sadist support or something like that to really beef up the damage on this. Or you could run Spellblade and run a blade instead of a wand as an alternative. Now, some of the things you want is like +2 amulet, +2 wand. So you get the skill gem up. The higher the skill gem, the more damage. But I think we could use an All's Uprising and maybe fit another whole aura in, like Grace or something like that, if we're going to be delving. Or we can fit in like Zealotry. Now, there's another thing in here that I haven't included in here, which is in the final tree, which is Zealotry set up in an Eternal Blessing setup as well. So temporary auras and things like that. So there's a lot that can be done with this build. It scales really well through the campaign. I think the total playtime was about 6.5 hours, and I'll link the 2 live streams where I played this through. And it just absolutely slapped. It was just a great build to play. And that's pretty much it. Like, mechanically, that's how the build works. So, yeah, now I will run through the leveling tree now, and we'll have a look at the POB. And then, yeah, we'll just go through the leveling for the axe as well. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for the build to basically get started. Like, it's a league starter too. So I guess prefacing on the fact that this is to get you into maps and to start getting you currency. And so basically, once you get to this point, you'll then be going from the league starter tree, which is this leveling tree that I've got in here, which I'll run through very shortly. And you'll be moving into the endgame tree, which will be a separate tree. And this is where you want to start investing in like Touch of Cruelty and all these different nodes and whatnot. And things like Grand Spectrum, which you're probably not going to be able to get straight away. And we'll be able to sub this out. But I'll also be leveling this build up at league start as well. So I'll be doing progressive guides for this build too, if the patch notes don't destroy it, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, let's get into the leveling tree and talk about that. Okay, so I've given a series of notes here, and I'll put some footage up below to basically talk you through how this build will work from a leveling perspective. So this is both in the notes section of the POB and also in the tree. I've provided a leveling tree to get it to where it is now, where it can do T5 maps with basically no gear whatsoever on a 4-link setup. So pretty much this build does require a couple of uniques initially. And so when I say that, like when you save up like 10 or 20 chaos, get a profane proxy ring, and if you can get a Wrathpith Globe, then that's going to do you a big advantage. It's going to give you a lot more HP, and it's going to give you a lot more spell damage. So it sort of does a bit of spell HP stacking. If you can't get a Wrathpith Globe, like any good spell shield with some crit and stuff like that will work really well. Campaign completion was 6 to 7 hours on a league start scenario, so it's very powerful. Collapse bosses. As you level this up, this will only get more powerful. So, you know, as we could see, it was pretty good just initially on level 5, on tier 5 maps, sorry. The other thing it also does really well is it does really good map clear, even up to T10, and I pushed it to a T16 wipe map where it's still like I didn't have any defenses, but I was still able to clear the map pretty easily, so it's very powerful. It's focused on, so one of the other things I've got in here, just as another disclaimer, like you really want to focus on maxing out resistances by the time you get to maps. If you got high resistances and build your HP up and your regen and your armor, because it does run determination, then you're going to have a much better time and experience playing this build. With Sanctum coming in, Sandstorm Visage is now available, and what that basically means is you can roll a really good one, get 100% crit, and that will reflect 100% crit in the game. Now, the other thing too is this build is really good for Sanctum because you can off-screen everything, so you don't need to be near anything, so it's actually a really good Sanctum build too, and was played pretty heavily in Sanctum, and I'm pretty sure if you can get one, Original Sin will work in this build as well, but I haven't tested that, so I'm not 100% sure. Now, Act 1, pretty straightforward stuff. You want to level up using Stormblast Mines, Swift Assembly, and add lightning damage or added cold damage initially. You also want to equip Clarity. You want to equip Vitality, Flame Dash, and then once you get to level 12, switch to Icicle Mines, which is what I did, and just level up with Icicle Mines. And I think you could also run Pyro Mines, and that'll also work as well. Act 2, just continue to level with Icicle Mines. Act 3, still using Icicle Mines, you'll need to complete the library quest to get access to Determination, so you can run Determination Aura in the background. And yeah, at this point, we're not worried about running a Hex Aura at this point. Now, you'll get to Act 4. So at level 28, you'll get access to Hexblast, and you'll get access to High Impact Mine, Minefield, and Void Manipulation you get earlier. But you won't be able to actually run it until level 31. This is when you can switch from Icicle Mines to Hexblast Mines. And the reason being is you need to run Blasphemy with either a Despair or a Frostbite Aura to be able to apply auras to enemies, and then you'll be able to actually use your Hexblast Mines initially. Now, if it doesn't feel good at level 31, keep going to like level 35 when you can unlock some aura nodes to get mana reservation efficiency up, and then you'll be able to run no sweat skitterbots and yeah, a blasphemy aura. Sorry, you'll need to run a blasphemy aura. And then also in Act 4, you want to focus on doing the Eternal Lab, Ascend to the Saboteur, and run Explosives Expert. And this is going to give you a lot more damage initially. Because I know, like, if we go tankier initially, people complain about that. So we got to go damage spec. Now, Act 5, if possible, save up all your Chaos. You're going to get to level 51 in Act 5 generally. Act 5 to Act 6, depending on how fast you are. And then basically you want to try and get a Profane Proxy Ring. And then you want to put it in your right socket so that your shock skitter applies the curse, or the hex, sorry. And then basically put Frostbite in there in the ring, and then your skitterbot will apply Frostbite. And you want to switch out your Blasphemy Aura for a skitterbot aura. Now, if you can't do that, if you can't get the ring, don't stress. It's league start. Just continue to run the Blasphemy Aura until you can get that ring, and then switch it over to skitterbots and Profane Proxy. Act 6, just keep leveling. Nothing really complicated about that. Act 7, ascend to Demolitions Expert. And yeah, you just continue. Act 8, again, no adjustments. Just continue leveling up. Make sure that you're focusing on capping your resistances and pushing your HP pool up further. And any armor that you can get into the build, absolutely go for it. Act 9, again, no adjustments. If you're starting to run below in your leveling, and I actually didn't have this problem, I was over leveled by the time I got to Act 9. Then basically do Blood Aqueduct until you get to level 65, and this will catch your level up for Act 10 and get you ready for mapping as well. Now, when you get to Act 10, focus on capping out your resistances, progress through to Act 10, and then obviously this build you can see can do T5 maps pretty much straight away, but you'll be able to progress through the early maps, and this will be the opportunity to gear and get everything that you need. Farm the uniques outlined in the endgame tree. So once you get to level 68 and you're mapping, then you're going to switch from this tree and you're going to be focusing on the endgame tree, and that's going to be your target tree. Now I'm going to be doing progress updates on this as well. So I'm going to be putting out like day 1, day 3, day 4 or 5 updates as well to help guide everyone through getting this build working and tanking it up and whatever. Now, aside from that, you don't need to follow my guide. There's a few guides ticking around for this at the moment. This is a very strong league starter and will get you to the end game really quickly. As long as you gear up. Like a lot of people run into issues when they play league starters. They just solely rely on the guide and they expect like when they get to like T5 to T10 mapping that the build will just do all the work itself. And that's just simply not the case. You've got to then take Creative Commons and then run with the build and get it working. So that's just something to bear in mind. If you start to feel that your damage is dropping off, it means you need some upgrades. You need to do a lower tier map, farm up currency, and then keep building up to it. And then the goal initially is map completion at the end of the day. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the leveling guide. Okay, now for the tree. So in the actual item setup, I've just put the most dog shittest items that I could possibly put in here. Like these are items that just dropped. There's absolutely nothing here that you should use as a guide except for Profane Proxy. What I would expect is as you're leveling up, you would be upgrading gear, going for things like crit multi, crit on your wand, and any other stat, spell damage, things like that is going to buff up your damage. Same with your shield, or get a shield that's a much better shield than what I'm running, and definitely focusing on getting a lot more HP on gear and resistances on gear than what I've done. So that's the first thing that I'll say there. Same with flasks, like ignore flasks, like run the flasks that you want to run. If you want to run armor flasks or whatever, depending on what you need defensively, then absolutely do that. So gearing wise, I've just run this on absolutely trash gear. That's basically just where it is at this stage. So as a league starter, this is, basically as real as it can get. Like I know people, if I put like any uniques in here and any great level of variety, then people will get upset about that. So this is why I've done it this way. This was as I leveled it up, raw run, nothing special, nice and easy. Now, skill setups. The main one here is Hexblast, Void Manipulation, Minefield, and High Impact. It's on a 4-link setup. Level 16, 17, 15, and 16. So not even leveled up, not even close. No Awakened Jewels, nothing. Yeah, I would anticipate getting to a 6-link before you go and get like a helm that has the rolls that you would need, like RF. This scale is very similar to that. Now, I did run Wither Totems in this, so I ran Wither, Spell Totems, multiple totems, Shield Charge with faster attacks, Determination, Molten Shell, Void Sphere, and Custom Damage Taken. I was running Clarity just to sustain my mana, Flame Dash as my alternative skill. My Frostbite was attached into Profane Proxy. Now, if you don't have a Profane Proxy initially, all you need to do is change that out, run a Blasphemy Aura, and ditch Skitters, and it's 35% reservation for either aura, so it's fine. And that's basically it for gem setup. So super simple, super easy. Now, this is just the league start tree. If you refer to the endgame tree, it's much more robust, and we'll talk about that very shortly. Now, tree-wise itself, I actually went and mapped like the best way to sort of attack putting this build together because I didn't have that sort of in front of me. The tree's basically very similar to the heat map. You can go different directions and go to Pain Attunement and stuff like that, but that's later in the track when you get into endgame. At this stage, this was just the most efficient way that I could find to level it up. So in here, I've provided a level 8 tree. I've provided a level 18 tree, a level 23 tree, a level 35 tree, where we basically start to take devastating devices, explosive elements, and we also go for Whispers of Doom so we can dual curse. And then I've also taken a 51 tree where we basically start to build this out further. We move down, we pick up like Discipline of the Forbidden, Cruel Preparations, Deep Thoughts, and Instability. And then level 68, which is where we've gotten the maps, and we've taken Arcane Potency, Purity of Flesh, and Sovereignty, so we get a lot more reservation efficiency out of this build as well, and a few more damage nodes and whatnot around here, and survivability, so Infused and Blood Drinker. Now, will this tree change? Potentially it will change with the patch notes. We don't know yet because we haven't seen the patch notes, so I'm going to continue to say the patch notes will really dictate the outcome of this build, but so far so good. We'll see how it plays out, and then we just need to adjust it accordingly, and that's why I'll be playing this from League Start as well, and I'll update this POB as well once the new POB comes out. So I'll replace this POB out. I just wanted to get a leveling guide out for this one. That's basically it for the League Starter tree. So everything's in the notes, the tree itself, the skill setups, items, super easy, super approachable. basically just the power is free power, just leveled off the skill itself, and it's a low level right now. So yeah. Some of the other things to keep in mind: if you're dying a bit, start focusing on defenses, push your HP up, push your armor up, maybe take Surge of Vigor. The other thing you could take, which I'll probably end up taking, is Infused Flesh. Anything that you can do to prop up defenses will be the priority if you're dying a lot initially. Or you want to be tankier, which will be the case with me. I'm probably going to be trying to run it with a Brass Dome setup, but we'll see how we go. But anyway, let's talk about the endgame tree next. Okay, so this is the big chingus of the trees, right? So this is where we get to when we're starting to target our endgame. So the first thing we'll notice is obviously the gearing setup significant. So we're running Wither. We've got Wither totems with multiple totems, all level 20. Obviously, this is endgame. Zealotry on Divine Blessing with Inspiration. We're running a Frostbite on our Profane Proxy. Hexblast is Void Manipulation, High Impact Mine, Hexblast, and Minefield. Now, you'll also notice when we talk about the itemization on this, is that this is like a technical 6-link item as well, based in the helm, which is just like an essence crafted helm. Now you can even get way better helms than that again. And we get up to level 28 Hexblast, which is where a lot of the damage comes from in this final build. Molten Shell, Skitterbots as well. Now Bear Trap, you don't need to run that. You can if you want. But something Skitterbots is needed, so it synergizes with Profane Proxy. Now I do have Determination, Flame Dash, Shield Charge. There is precision in the build. This is based on the Watcher's Eye that's in the build, which gives you crit strike. But bearing in mind, like, this is a very, very endgame build. But it has crit strike multiplier when you have precision. Critical strikes penetrate 9% enemy elemental resistances while affected by zealotry, because we have Divine Blessing as well in this build. So then we have basically Elemental Weakness, which is just an on-hit proc, which we can get from Delve nodes, really easy to get. And this is a nothing roll on here. Now, looking at items, so this is where we start to get into the price of the build, and this is where you start to level up and you just need to sort of work towards achieving these outcomes. So you want +2 on the wand. This is like a crazy expensive wand by endgame, but this will be where you target. If you get anywhere close, your damage is still going to be very respectable. If you get to like 4 million, that's pretty good. This is up there damage-wise, this endgame tree, by the way. Then you want to go Wrathpith Globe, and basically the more health you stack, because the goal is to get to 7400 HP, the more health you stack, the more crit chance you do, and the more spell damage you do as well. So there is that. Chaos Visage, again, like, this is basically, pardon me, this is our Essence Crafted Helm at the end of the day. So yeah, basically like trying to roll any other RF helmet, you would do the same here. Does it need to be this perfect? No. It can be a little less perfect than this. Like, you could probably get rid of the +2, or we could craft +2 onto the helm as well, so you don't need to roll it on there. And if you can get anywhere near hypothermia or whatever, you can do that. Alternatively, we can try and fit a 6-link in the chest. Now, this is a little bit of a health stacker scenario, so we do use Chaos Heart. I am aware 50% damage implicit's pretty crazy, so you could just get a normal one. And Chaos Heart's a relatively cheap League on League anyway, so that's pretty approachable. Gloves, just all resistances, damage against chilled enemies, and damage while flask. Pretty easy stuff. Legion Boots, same thing. 100% chance to avoid chills, probably going to be a little hard, but it is achievable. Amulet, +2 Amulet, +1 to skill gems, and +1 to chaos. We can drop this down a little bit and just go +1 to chaos. It's probably going to be more achievable with the rolls that are on there, but we'll see how we go. My other alternative is run another aura, like Hatred or something like that. Or maybe not Hatred, but Envy, yeah, if we could get an Envy Crystal, All's Uprising or something like that does additional chaos damage. Otherwise, we could go more defensive and run a Grace Aura and have a Grace Armor hybrid setup, which would be really good for Delve, and we could do that with an All's Uprising with Grace on it. Alternatively, we could always run Haste as well and have a Haste setup, but it just depends on what's available and what's dropping. Probably going to go more defensive and drop the damage back a little bit on that basis. Same with rings. This is just like this is a synthesized implicit, but we can achieve the same result of this ring by going into Delve and farming Delve nodes. So very easy to get Elemental Weakness on hit, or curse enemies with Elemental Weakness on hit in Delve, if we get a Delve ring to do that. Profane Proxy, pretty much no-brainer, needed for the build. It means you don't have to run a Blasphemy setup initially. Same with the belt. This is a pretty high tier belt, but initially you're not going to need the percentage life roll. And this is achievable, by the way, but it just takes a little bit. Like, this is a very expensive end game tree, so yeah. Same with Whispering Orb or whatever. That's just in Stygian Visage, Stygian Vise. Bottle Faith, these are usually pretty cheap in the first few weeks or whatever, but like I said, this is an endgame tree. Diamond Flask, Rock Gut Quicksilver Flask, don't really need this, so we'll probably end up switching this out. If we get something like a Progenesis or something like that, that's going to be a lot better and going to make you a hell of a lot tankier. Granite Flask, and there is a Mana Flask in here initially in this tree, but the way that I'm going to build the tree, you're not going to need that. So yeah, we can take that out. Now, this does have Forbidden Flame. What's really interesting is with the Saboteur, these Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh Jewels are generally pretty cheap, but we can get rid of this, and it will just drop our damage at the end of the day, but it is what it is. Same with the Watcher's Eye, we can get rid of this. Grand Spectrums as well, we can get rid of these. So we're not even accounting for the grand spectrums anyway, so it doesn't even make any difference whether or not it's in there. We could just get rid of them. So, you know, we could just, bam, drop that out, drop that out, drop that out. Voices, obviously we wouldn't use voices, and this is a League Start build, so, and this is the endgame ultimate tree, so yeah, we could get rid of that. So for the time being, we'll just leave those. Okay, and then we have like Militant Faith, Dissolution of Flesh. You get the idea. Anyway, this is endgame. This isn't like start of game. Now, as far as the tree setup, very similar. There's a little bit of respecking. You would move out of these nodes once you get accessibility to be able to do anoints and things like that. And then basically you would come up through this area, which is very similar to the existing tree. And then we would start adding in our cluster jewels like Guerrilla Tactics, Expert Sabotage, Surprise Sabotage, Guerrilla Tactics, Touch of Cruelty, and Wicked Pull. And I'd probably add Unspeakable Gifts as well, so we get Chaos Pop just for a little bit more oomph, because that looks cooler, and then we could get that there. And then basically, yeah, more cluster jewels here just to amp up crit multi where we can, and trap throwing speed. Mine throwing speed. And this is where we would just stitch this all together because this is just gratuitous. I've just pulled this tree from PoB and sort of reworked it around to make it all sort of work. My endgame tree will probably end up being significantly different to this, but this just gives you an idea of where to go. And this is a very extreme example of a build that's like much more investment. But if you get to like 3 or 4 mil on the hit DPS with much, much less investment, which is probably what I'm going to target, then that's still going to be an extremely respectable build and do an absolute fuck ton of damage. But yeah, this is basically the endgame tree, and this POB will be in the description below, and there'll also be poe.bb as well in there as well for anyone who's playing on console and whatnot. Okay, so I hope this sort of early League Start leveling guide is informative and helpful to sort of get you on track and give you a bit of an idea of what to play for League Start. Obviously, patch notes, again, they're not out yet, so this build could drastically change. It could be nerfed, it could be buffed, it could go either way right now. That being said, I haven't played it into full endgame. I've blasted through the campaign over the last 2 nights to do some level testing. And this is what I found worked quite efficiently. Basically everything that I've put together in this video. And then obviously the endgame tree I've picked from PoB and basically went through and done some benchmarking and things like that, and gotten to the point where I was like, okay, that looks like a pretty good tree. Now that being said, is my tree going to look exactly like that? Absolutely not. We're going to be respecking this build from League Start into a more delve-based build, so I generally play tankier characters, so we're going to make this a lot more tanky. That being said, it should be pretty tanky when you get it into the end game. Once you get the ascendancies and whatnot into it, and you're able to inflict blind, that's actually a huge damage reducer for incoming damage from enemies and bosses. And also on top of that, you know, once we put on things like, I'm probably going to go Brass Dome or something very similar to that, then it should get pretty crazy pretty quick. Anyway, if you like this video, don't forget to follow the channel. Don't forget to follow the Twitch. I'll be streaming over there, and I'll be streaming this build on League Start. I've also got a Twitter up and running, just, you know, all the usual social things. There'll be descriptions, links in the description and in the comments below. Feel free to ask any questions about how this was the level, how it felt, everything else. I feel like I've pretty much nailed down pat a really easy way to approach leveling. Yes, this only goes to T5 maps so far, and at the end of this video, I'll put a little extract of some mucking around with T16 blasting from stream last night. And yeah, anyway, hopefully this gives you a bit of an idea of what to play. Now, I've also read feedback on comments as well from other players, and also in the chat last night. Everyone seems to be of the consensus. This was a fantastic build in Sanctum. It still was very strong last league, and it's really funny to see that I think mines are going to be the meta for this league, depending on what we see come out with the patch notes, hopefully tomorrow. Anyway, until next time, don't forget to like and sub, and stay filthy, and bye.